everybody, my name is Crissy and I'm with the Chattanooga Public Library. And for today's video, we have a really special guest with us. So special guest, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Gay Jeffers. I am a professor of theater at UTC. Happy to be here today. Can't wait to have a conversation with Crissy.
I'm so excited to have you. Little secret here, Gay was one of my professors at UTC and I personally identify you as my mentor, so I'm so excited to be here having a conversation with you. Obviously, you're here with us today to talk a little bit about theater, but big picture, we're talking about when theater, history, and English language collide. So this video is for all of high school ELA students, and so I just kind of want to go ahead and hand the mic over to you to kind of talk about a little background of theater and history and English language.
Well, I think it's important to realize that theater is a response to the world around us. It is an expression, as is all art, that once we state an idea and we put an idea out into the world, it disrupts the status quo. It disrupts the norm. So we are responding to the world in which we are now living. And theater happens in the present. When we go to the theater, when we're not in 2020 in this time of pandemic, but when we actually go to theater, it's happening before us live in real time. It is presented by actors who are living in the moment, and we are seeing them as audience members living in the moment. So we are actually witnessing actors sharing a moment live that will comment on what is happening in the world around us. Theater gives a voice to those people who are voiceless. And often when we are audience members and we're sitting in the theater, what we hear characters on the stage say or what we see characters on the stage do may be akin to what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and what we're doing. So the audience is participating in the world of the play with the actors. And I always think that good theater reminds us that we are alive, that we are sharing a moment as a community. And regardless of the time period of the play, we are experiencing the story in the moment together. And while theater begins with a script, which is just words on a page, written by a playwright, which is usually an individual, but could be a group of people writing together, it is written as literature. When it's put on the stage and it's on its feet, as we say, then it becomes theater. It no longer becomes just words on a page, but it takes on a life of its own and it becomes an experience. We are really close to our lives as theater artists, that we are really mirroring back what we are seeing in our world through a theatrical venue, if you will. And we have so many ways to do that. Theater has a lot of different types of people who work. We have designers who create a set, designers who create lights and costumes, directors who help guide, and actors who live the world. So we are working together to create a world that exists off the page, if you will.
From your perspective as a theater professor, but also as a writer, how would you encourage kids to explore plays as an art form when you're reading it?
So when we're reading a play, it's going to require us to use our imaginations in different ways than we would if we were reading a novel or a short story or the newspaper. We are having to fill in the blanks that would be filled in if we saw it on the stage. So sometimes I encourage students to really think about, if I saw this in my imagination, if I became this character as I said these words, how would I feel? How would I move? What would be in my world around me? I kind of like to use this image that when you're reading plays, you kind of have to sit forward and you kind of have to be focused. And you kind of have to put all of your imagination into play, because the playwright is not giving you all of the clues. She's saving some and asking you to fill in the blanks. And often I think it's really great to read plays out loud. Even if you're sitting at home by yourself, when you get the words of that character into your body and you say them out loud, they live in a different way. So if you can read a play out loud, I suggest, finding yourself a corner or a quiet place and read it out loud and use your imagination to fill in all of those things that the playwright has left out. How do you think the character is feeling at this moment? How do you imagine the living room set that this play is in, or the forest? Or how do you picture in your mind the light coming through a window? So you're going to put all of these things into play as you read. And that's why theater is so great too, because your idea could be different from someone else's. How you visualize it in your head as you read may not be the same as your friend. That's okay. It is coming from you and what you're bringing to the play. I often encourage students to draw what they see in their head, to express it in different ways, but to kind of get it fully in yourself so that your imagination can take flight and take those words right off the page, even if you're only reading them.
How does the theater still produce Shakespearean plays or plays that have been written a long, long time ago and still keep them relevant?
Even if a play was written hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago or 50 years ago, theater is not a museum. Theater is not a display of history. Theater is not caught in some little moment that we're trying to replicate. That's impossible. I wasn't alive when Shakespeare's plays were being first produced. We don't have video recordings of his plays. I looked first at what's happening in this play. What is the conflict? What is at stake? And try to find contemporary references that help that. I know that some students are reading Othello. And when you read Othello, you can look at that in so many different ways, and the themes and the situations in that play still resonate with us today. The idea of the outsider, the idea of the other, the idea of obsession, these are all things that we still think about, are challenged by in 2020, even though this play was written in the 16th century. We are still battling those ideas. So if we as theater artists dig into the plays from the past and figure out what is it that still speaks to us today, how can we approach this so that the audience that we're presenting the play to now, or who is reading the play now, can relate to? And how can we use that as our way into a world that we obviously don't live in? None of us are living in Venice. We don't know what that world is like, but we often do know what it's like to be the other, or the outsider, or the person who is judged by the color of their skin, or their gender, or where they fit into society, or who they married or who they didn't marry. We can all relate to some of those ideas. Great plays from the past still speak to us, and that's why we do them. There are thousands of plays we don't do that were written thousands of years ago, because those basic truths of trying to figure out who we are as human beings don't resonate to us anymore. Theater artists are looking for what is relevant, what is touching, what can we grab onto emotionally in these plays. I don't like to see theater that's done like it's some kind of history to be preserved. That doesn't matter to us today. We are reading based on who we are today. That's how we approach how we do theater, or how we look at anything. When we look at television shows that were filmed in the 50s, that's not the world we live in. So we're looking at it going, yeah, that's not my world, but I can see things in there that I can relate to. So let me pull those things out and use those as sort of my base to approach the play.
How do you think that good old William Shakespeare would feel about his play still being done, but under a whole entire different light, or, different circumstances, instead of it being set in Venice, maybe it's set in Venice Beach?
I think personally that he would love that, because he was writing at a time when society was facing many of the same things. I mean, he wrote many of his plays during times of plague, in which he was not allowed to practice his craft, and because theaters were closed. And so I think that he would look at his audience, and he was speaking to his audience. So I think that he would appreciate that we are still speaking to our audience. And he didn't shy away from conflict. He didn't shy away from expressing humanity and all of its challenges and all of its goods, bads, joys, and violence. He went there, but he also really wanted to entertain people. And so I don't think he would want us to sort of present his work as some kind of precious historical.
Mhm.
Yeah, he wouldn't want that. He would want us to engage with the audience. And so I think he would go, yeah, more power to y'all. Do it. I think he would want us to explore and set Othello in Venice Beach.
Can you think of anybody off the top of your head that historically you think like, oh no, they would absolutely hate for any portion of their, masterwork to be bastardized in some way?
There are a lot of playwrights who are passed away now whose work is not in public domain, which means that you have to do it as they prescribed, that I think would not like that. Probably Samuel Beckett, whose play Waiting for Godot, probably would not understand us taking it out of its
Mhm.
context so much.
I guess he definitely wanted it the way that it was done. What are some of the tools that are used that we can, as theater artists, use to take a play and put it on the stage exactly as it was meant to be seen originally?
If we look at a play like A Raisin in the Sun, that would be a play that you have to really research the context of when it was written and the context in which the play is exploring and the time period and the given circumstances. Because without that, much of the meaning of the play can get muddled. It's very much a play that I often wonder, will it ever be a period piece? And by that I mean, will it ever not resonate with us? The conflict of that play, is based on a very racial divide in a community in which a Black family wants to purchase a home in a white neighborhood, and the conflict that comes from that. I think that if we steer too far away from what Lorraine Hansberry wrote originally in 1959, I think, then it would not speak to us in the way that we need to still hear this play. The conflict that is in this play is still so very relevant. And the play speaks, of course, on many broad spectrums, but we have to really research what was life like on the south side of Chicago in the 50s. What did a family have to go through? How did the average family live in an apartment that was too small? All of those things are really speaking to a specific time in history, a specific place. And so research, putting on your detective hat and figuring out what the world was like for this family in this play would be important to then be able to translate that onto the stage. So that's a pretty good example of when you really want to keep a play in its context. 50 years from now, it could be different. But right now, the play, we've not outgrown this play. The conflict is still here. Mm-hmm. And so we can still explore that and read that play and talk about it and live it, mm-hmm. and witness it still today. So researching, figuring out when those characters lived and how they lived will help us get a better idea of the playwright's meaning.
Since you are a playwright yourself, I would love to know your feelings on this. When playwrights are creating works, how much do current events impact, affect, influence their work? Going further, how much do you look back through history and grab influence from historical moments?
I think every playwright, present, past, and future, is totally influenced by the world in which they're living. We can't help but be inspired and enraged and challenged by the world in which we're living, the given circumstances of our place. While we may not come right out and tell you that in our work, it's going to seep through there somehow. If we go back to Shakespeare, when he was writing plays, Queen Elizabeth I said, you can no longer write plays about politics and religion. That was an edict that she put down to try to create some sort of peace in the country. So in his brain, in his world, it's all about politics and religion. So he he's of course influenced by that, but that's not the output that you may see on the page directly. It wouldn't be truthful for us to pretend we weren't living in the time period in which we're living. And I think all artists are in the same boat. We are all inspired, infuriated by our world. And that's what makes us want to create. That's what makes us want to write. That's what makes us want to paint or to compose, is the need to say something. It's kind of like playwrights and all artists are in an active state of listening and witnessing all the time. So even when you go back and you look at history and you look at other plays and you look at other pieces of literature, you can be influenced by them, but it's still coming through you in your own time period. If we think about The Crucible, which I think some of your students are reading, Arthur Miller wrote that as a response to the McCarthy hearings, that he himself was going through being asked if he were a communist. And so he wrote a play set in the Salem witch trials to comment on something that was happening in his world in his day. So I think being attuned to what's happening in our world is important for us as citizens and for us as artists. The artists are taking what they know all of the citizens around them are feeling and witnessing and seeing, and we are sometimes the voices that help the citizens find ways to be empathetic, to find ways to have their emotions validated. And that's what theater can do. That's what great art can do. So we are all influenced by what's happening. I'm just can't wait to see what plays will be written about 2020 and us all living in this completely different kind of world in which isolation has been something that we didn't know would happen. We didn't know how we would deal with it, but that we've all just had to readjust. And so I think there's going to be some great art that comes out of this period of self-reflection. And I expect some high school students to be keeping a journal and to be writing down what's happening in their lives every day, because they are living history right now. So record it and write it down and express it.
It reminded me of something that you told me when I was in college many, many moons ago. And it was actually a challenge that you gave in one of our classes where, you know, everybody walking around on campus, headphones in, head down, staring at the phone. And the challenge was for like the rest of the semester, every single time that you walk to and from class, like take your headphones out, put your phone in your pocket and look at the world, look at the people, look at their face, like what are they feeling? How does that make you feel? You know, how do you fit into this? And that is something to this day I do. It's that idea of like taking those small moments, like writing down what's going on, looking at other people. That's the moments that set good art into motion. That's what gives you the inspiration to see somebody and they look sad walking down the road in their mask and you're like, I'm going to write a whole scene about this person and their experience. I have no idea what it is.
We are witnessing. We are those people who are taking the notes.
I guess that's our challenge to all of the high schoolers out there. Write things down.
Your journal.
Keep a journal. Those are all of my specific questions. Is there anything else that you would like to say to our viewers to inspire?
I just want to encourage everyone to believe in your own thoughts, your own feelings, listen and witness, and to kind of figure out where you fit in this big scheme of things and know that everything that you think and feel is valid and that you are important. And what you think and feel and when you read a play and your ideas that you have about it are valid and important. And just keep on reading. Keep on reading about history. Keep on reading about what's happening in our world. It matters. You matter.
Well, thank you so much, Gay, for taking the time to talk to us today. And hopefully we will be able to talk to you again soon.
That would be great.
Thank you.